will take nearly $50 billion by the FCC's own estimate to reach all of Americans with 100 megabits per second. And now we dream of gigabit speeds. No one can consciously claim that Title II will advance the flow of private capital necessary to meet these ambitions.
The Obama administration is not seeking to make the internet an easier place for Americans to wander. It is seeking nothing more than crushing small companies, keeping the fat cable cats rolling, and micromanaging the internet until it is almost impossible for Americans to use and afford. Therein lies one side of this coming broadband blowout. Add to that charges that the man who is supposed to keep the public's best interests at heart is little more than a puppet of the Obama administration. Let's welcome to MidPoint. He is the president of Citizens Against Government Waste, an organization we feature here on MidPoint because there may be no group of busier people inside the Beltway at any time. Thomas Schatz joins us today on the show. Tom, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Tom, let's go ahead and then talk about Tom Wheeler. Why is he then considered to be a puppet of the Obama administration? People would say, gee, he's just doing his job. Nod, 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 wink, wink.
The chairman last year talked about making some changes to the rules and regulations about net neutrality, i.e. how information is obtained on the internet, fast lanes, slow lanes, information superhighway, paying more for better information, faster information. That's more or less how this whole process is being done. The FCC has already twice been overturned by the courts saying you don't have the authority to do this in a certain way, and now with this Title II, they are looking at it that way, and Thursday is the big day. This Thursday, the 26th of February, they will be voting on the chairman's proposal to essentially have the government take over the internet. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that. They're controlling everything from what you can see, when you can see it, what you can pay, what you can't pay. They're going to regulate the internet like the old Bell telephone companies based on a 1934 Communications Act. That was established when the internet wasn't even thought about.
So if it's a 1934 act and Tom Wheeler is the chairman of the FCC, I'm going to ask a very simple question here. Why then is this man in charge of the FCC not doing the right thing and bringing this to speed, or at least into the 21st century here? I mean, really, what has he got to gain by basically rolling over here to the Obama administration?
He was going to do somewhat of the right thing last year, kind of following what the court suggested, regulating it under a different section of the Communications Act. But less than a week after the elections in November, when the president's party got squashed, one of the first things that the president did is say, we should regulate the internet under Title II. It was a very unexpected comment. It was something that was not the first thing you thought he would say, but it made clear that whatever the Chairman Wheeler was thinking wasn't what the White House wanted. And now there is letters from the chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, asking what happened at the White House, who said what, when did it occur, did the president interfere with the decision-making process of an independent agency? And this has happened before because President Reagan once even thought about talking to the FCC and had a small conversation very far away from what they're doing now. And the court said you can't regulate on that topic. So this is going to be an ongoing issue. Whatever happens Thursday is really only the beginning because you have a policy problem and you have a politics problem.
Tom, let's just see if we can break this down for people and make it very simple. If the Obama administration gets its way and they're able to do what they want, you will sign on to your internet, you will continue to look, you'll continue to cruise, you'll continue to do whatever else you want, but instead of paying a simple fee to the cable company, whatever it is, you will now be paying a governmental fee, a governmental tax, and other governmental charges in order to do it, correct?
Right, about $15 billion a year for the American people. And of course, the FCC has said, no, we're really not going to tax anything. We're going to forbear, in other words, refrain from using all of that Title II, all of the heavy-handed public utility kind of regulation. And that's the best way to describe what's going to happen. The internet will be regulated like an electric company, like a phone company, like a public utility subject to complete regulatory control, how much you can charge, what you can provide, and it will slow it down. Nobody's going to want to innovate because they won't know if that'll be allowed to appear on the internet.
Where are the cable operators themselves on this?
Interestingly, Comcast, because of the Time Warner merger has agreed to what the FCC said in 2010. There were already principles to guide what they call the open internet. The FCC made that decision in 2010. Pretty much everybody's abiding by those because they're pretty broad. But in the last couple of years, because they've tried to codify that, turn it into a regulation, a formal regulation versus principles, the courts have said, no, you can't go that far. Congress, by the way, is holding hearings and it has been looking at updating the Telecommunications Act. The most recent update was the most recent update of the 34 Act was 1996. It's still outdated, and Congress is really the only place where this can be done, and they would do a much better job, obviously, than the now politicized Federal Communications Commission.
Is Comcast staying a little mum because they want to make sure that this merger between they and Time Warner go through, and they've got to have all the governmental agencies on their side to make sure it happens?
I don't think they'd be happy with what the FCC is planning to do. Everybody else has certainly spoken out, but as I said, the regulations that they have to follow now are relatively mild and really not going to have much of an impact on what people have now with the internet. But if these go through, it will be entirely different. Some people are calling it one of the most radical things that ever happened to the telecommunications and technology world, and I don't think that's an inaccurate assessment.
Is it as simple to say as this is a government takeover of the internet and it will now be a government agency? And I think people need to hear that said out loud, because I think when we start talking about net neutrality and so many other things, people's eyes glaze over, and you need to say to them in very simple language, you will now be subject to the government watching your internet 24/7 and you will pay them for it. End of story.
Well, it's ObamaNet. Talk about Obamacare. Everybody knows that that's not working very well. Too expensive, can't access what you want, and that's going to be the same thing with the internet. It's going to be very expensive, it's going to be unwieldy, it's going to be inefficient, it's going to be everything that people may remember from the old dial-up phones. You had to pick up the phone, you had to wait, it took a while to get the call through, sometimes it was busy, you didn't get through it all, you didn't have call waiting, you didn't have modernized technology. Really going back to the dark ages of telecommunications and technology, and it's another example of Obama knows best. This government wants to control everything you do, and this is a huge, very successful industry. It's one of the reasons that the U.S. economy is growing, or has grown, not as much as we'd like, but it is very key to our future. The internet is essentially grown here, controlled here, not by the government yet, but when they do, it's going to be a disaster.
And the vote comes up on Thursday. We will follow it here as well. Don't forget the website is cagw.org for Citizens Against Government Waste. Thomas Schatz, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, take care. One small island in the middle of nowhere 70 years ago.